just being able to do your effective research coming into it. Because when you come in, and it's much, this pulls on the thread of my my science background as well. It's you want to come into these conversations with an informed opinion on that, your hypothesis, if you will.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 46 of Sales Stories in Real Life. I'm your host, Alex Bruschi, and this is the show where professional salespeople share their stories on memorable buying experiences. Today, we've got a very special friend of the show. You probably know him as the host of the 20% podcast. Welcome to the show, Tyler Meckes. I hear you had a really interesting experience when you were buying a home and even kind of selling your way into a home. What happened there, Tyler?
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me, Alex. I love it. As you mentioned, I just had you on the 20% podcast a couple of weeks ago, and it's really fun to be on this side of it. I will say it's a little anxious because I don't know where some of the questions will go next. But ultimately, obviously, being able to work together for a little while and becoming good friends with you, I know this will be a good conversation. So I wanted to share with you, when you're talking about all these fun experiences of buying and selling, the most memorable experience that I had was when we were actually buying our home. Not only when you're buying a home, it's important to be a buyer, but you also there's a lot of selling that goes involved with buying the home as well. So I don't know where you want me to take the story first, Alex, but let me know and I can kind of jump right in.
Start from the beginning and go for it, man. We'll pepper in the questions after you're done.
All right, perfect. So all right. So picture this, it's 2020. This COVID thing, this pandemic just hit, and we just had our first child a couple weeks before the pandemic started. So we were in this house. Fortunately, we were renting a 2-bedroom place, and it was really it was great because it was just the three of us at that point, and we were home with our son. We got to see him roll over for the first time. There was a lot of great memories in this little rental house. But over time, obviously, as anybody out there who has kids, or everybody's been around kids, they grow up and they want to get mobile and they want to move around. And, it's moving into 2021, we have a 1.5-year-old at that point, and we knew that we needed to get a place. And as I was telling Alex before, we had this little setup downstairs in our dining room where we actually sold our dining room table in order to make more room for our son to be able to play around and have a safe space when my wife and I are working, right? It's really not easy to work and have a child in the same place. So we sold our dining room table and actually moved our couch setup into where the kitchen was, so we could just have more room for our kid. So we always joke around saying that there's going to be we're going to tell him those stories over time of like, hey, we sacrificed, we did what we had to do, and we ate sitting on the kitchen floor for a long time just for the betterment of our child. So at that point, it was mid 2021. We were searching starting probably February, March. We were even probably searching before that. And at that point in the market, there was really not that similar to how it is now. There really wasn't that much inventory on the market. And it was a really anxious time because we were like, we really need this place. We're really nervous. We just want to grow. But there were so many houses that we went and looked at. I don't want to say we looked at hundreds of houses, but we're constantly, like, anytime you're up in the middle of the night, you're looking at Zillow, you're looking, hey, what happened next? Is this one coming up? We're trying to start talking to more realtors to say, hey, is there any, much like if you're in a job search, right? Trying to find those houses that aren't on the market. Hey, how can we try to strike a deal before we get hit with these other, 400, 500 applications if it's a job search, or just trying to do whatever you can to get in. So eventually we found this place and we were like, oh man, we really want this. Some of the big things though, when you're buying a home, much like you're buying software or you're buying anything else, you need to have a checklist of the need to haves, must to haves, or I'm sorry, need to have must haves are the same thing. But nice to haves as well in there as well. So there was so many things on our list. We had some non-negotiables that we wanted to go at, and then we ultimately found a place that fit all of those goals. And we were like, all right, when it's time to put in the offer, what are we going to do? We put in over what the asking price was because we knew, like, hey, we know that there's a money component to this, but there's some other factors that come into it as well. So I'll pause there, Alex, and see before we jump into the rest of the story, see if there's any other follow-up questions on that.
Well, I know what's coming next, and I think a lot of my questions are for what comes next because I think that's where a lot of the real kind of juicy takeaways were. But I love how you obviously have such great memories of this older place, right? Selling your dining room table just to have room for your son, right? It just kind of like builds up the story and makes it better. So why don't you take off from where you were just at?
No, absolutely. So, yeah, so we were like, we need this new place. We're putting in this offer. And what we did though is we took that the next step further. And we found out a little bit more about the people who owned the house before. We understood that they had three children and they were at a younger age growing up, right? When you're walking around the house, you obviously see the pictures and you see like what the actual setup is, and you even see the little marks on the wall of them growing. So you know that there's some really sentimental things in this house, much like we had at the other house of this is where we brought our first child home, right? When there's a big emotional component to buying and selling a house. I can't even imagine thinking about trying to sell this house as well, but we'll save that waterworks for later on. So we realized, okay, this family has a couple kids. We ended up, when we put our offer in, we wrote a letter to them as well saying, hey, we understand, obviously this is a beautiful development to raise your children. Obviously you've raised some children here, and we have one child and we're looking to grow and expand our family as well. So here's some of the situation of what we were going under, and how that if you go with us, you'd be getting somebody who would take care of the house, and we would be putting into it, making it as nice as we possibly can. And that it would be going to a family who wanted to do a lot of the same things that you did as well. Some people are motivated by just the money portion of it. Is, hey, at all costs, I don't care. Is what's the bottom line? What's the highest cost? And I'm going to go, or highest price, and I'm going to go with that. However, that ended up actually being a significant portion of the story, because there was an emotional component to the house for them as they raised their children here. We ultimately looked into the records, and you could see when they bought the house and how long they had it for. So there's a lot of research that we did on the back end of trying to buy this house before we ever even had purchased it. And then fortunately, a couple weeks later, we found out that they accepted our offer. My wife and I remember our real estate agent called us while my wife was sleeping on the couch, and we were just like hanging out, and we were just so excited. I know by the time this comes out, Alex will be in his new gig. So it's understanding that, like, when you want something so bad, just that feeling that you get when you got that and you signed and you're all good. It's the best feeling in the world. But then you realize, I need to pay for this thing. And then that was a whole nother story.
I mean, you're really transferring the energy over, because we ironically earlier episode had Tara Horsemeyer on, and she was describing her experience of buying a house. And it was kind of more from the angle of the realtor selling them on being in the neighborhood, right? Instead of just buying a house. This is almost kind of I don't want to say exact opposite, but this is almost a different side of the coin, where you're talking about buying a house when there's multiple offers on every property, right? I'm sure some offers are cash, right? Some offers may be well above asking. So you're almost kind of flipping the script, and you're almost selling the current homeowners on why you should take my offer over other people's. And then just the detail and length that you guys went to of looking how long they had the house, how many kids do they have, pictures on the wall, right? When you're a family with three children, you got to imagine that those children grew up in that neighborhood, right? And were playing with the kids who live next door, right? And then when they see a letter from Tyler and his wife about, hey, we want to raise our family here, and then they feel in their heart like, oh, they could be friends with next door neighbor Timmy, right? And Joey down the block, and Samantha down the street, whatever it may be. Now it's not just an offer of X amount of dollars, right? It's an offer of X amount of dollars from the Meckes family, right? So you're going just that extra step to humanize yourself. How did the realtor play in the whole situation, right? Like, was it just like, hey, we have so many bids, like, just do your best, right? Or did the realtor kind of like do any sort of special liaison or anything like that?
Yeah, and I think that's you must have been reading my notes here as well, because I literally just put great real estate agent as another talking point that I wanted to have. It's really important, and we actually went through a couple of real estate agents at that point, because just whether some of them weren't a right fit or whatever the case is, it's again, it needs to I don't want to say you're intimately working with these people, but they're putting a lot of time and effort into driving to these different houses and understanding what it is. They had to do a significant amount of discovery to us so that they can understand what exactly are you looking for? What are those must needs? What are those nice to haves? And she is a great real estate agent who's been around the block. And like, they know what questions to ask and they know what's important or what's not important. And that's really crucial for them to understand. It's not only important for us because they're driving all over the place. And the last thing you want to do is some places you pull up to the house and you don't even walk in and you're like, this isn't it. And like, and fortunately I don't want to say we weren't that picky, but when you're spending a lot of money, you need to be picky. But this real estate agent, she did such a great job of understanding what are those must needs, what are those things, so that she could proactively send that to us. So that it's important for her, but it's really important for us to really nail in what is it that we actually want. And there's a lot of questions where we didn't have those questions. She saw around the corner of things that we didn't necessarily know as first time homeowners, and different techniques that you could do, or the different just the different laws and regulations of how things go. You know, we were first time buyers, so you could use that to your advantage sometimes, but the point being is that it's so crucial to have a great real estate agent, because not only are they helping you in the process, but they ultimately sometimes get ins with some other real estate agents, or if they know that person who's selling the house, they could work deals or whatever the case may be. I don't remember with this house specifically if anything like that happened. I don't think our real estate agent knew that. But I mean, having somebody who's your Sherpa, essentially, of like, who's going to be walking you up this mountain of buying a home, because there's a lot of things that you need to know when you're applying for your mortgage, or once they're ready to approve. Then it's like they need all of your financial information, what you have spent, what you haven't spent. So like, we're like, hey, you can't really spend on Amazon right now just for this next couple of weeks, because everything is scrutinized and you don't want to mess anything up. And those are just all from the big things down to the little minor details. I think it's really crucial to have somebody who has done it before and could walk you through that.
So well said. It's so much more than just the person who shows you the house, right? It's so much more than the keeper of the listings, right? Like you said, you're getting educated on local laws and, penalties and jurisdictions and, all that red tape. It's knowing what to do with your money before, right? As a first-time buyer, you haven't gone through the process of being approved for a loan before. So just, you said it perfectly, looking around those corners that you guys didn't know, any bit of friction that's removed in that process, especially when you're buying a house, right? Which for 99% of people is the biggest purchase you'll ever make in your life. To have someone kind of seeing around those corners for you, I couldn't even imagine. And obviously heavily relates to B2B, right? Like, when you're just someone who just shows what the product does and just shows the features and benefits, you're not really going to get very far, right? Like, you have to be able to look around the corner for your prospects, right? And teach them stuff that they never knew. So obviously you have experience, not only you and I working together, but of course you built out the account management function at Dooley. You've obviously spent some time in tech. What would be, not necessarily as direct, B2B relations, though those I think are kind of obvious in this situation, but what would you say are some of your biggest learnings in B2B, right, and selling that you'd give to the audience?
Yeah, I think from the homeowning, from this experience, from purchasing the house as well. Okay, how that ties together. Yeah, I think that the biggest lesson is there's a couple big ones. Number one, it's just being patient, right? Oh, and it's really crucial. As I mentioned, we looked at a bunch of different homes. We didn't know, when you're ready to buy and you're hungry, much like you're on the job market and you're trying to find a new home, you kind of like turn your eye to some of the other potential red flags of what you may see. And you're looking through those rose-colored glasses. So I think it's really important to strip everything away and get it down to like, okay, well, hey, let's say we're actually in this house. We say that it's a little bit over our budget, but like, can we actually pay for this thing? Or, hey, we need to upgrade this if we bought this. Is that going to be worth it? Or is this house even big enough for us? This has a backyard, but it may not have this. It all comes back to being very straightforward and understanding what are those must needs and the nice to haves, and then working backwards and being patient until you could check a lot of those boxes and understand that you need to live with the ramifications of that moving forward, whether it's a job or whether it's on the market. So I think that's probably the big one. And again, I think it's really just trying to understand, like, is this, it comes back to like, is the pain of what, and I know that there's no pain in buying a house potentially. But like, what are the main problems that we're looking to solve with this house? Right. Same in B2B. It's understanding, like, again, I keep coming back to it. The nice to haves, must haves. We need to know exactly what it is so that we could dive in and get the house that we love. And fortunately, I mean, we played our cards right, and we did it. Now, the other fun thing that I learned from this is that how much I love real estate after doing this. I have my dad's a background in construction, so I've always been really handy and really been learning a lot from him. But we learned so much from a project management perspective when we bought this house and timing everything up right. As I mentioned, we were renting the other place, so we rented it for another month so that we could come in here, and we need to get the walls painted because we didn't like the colors. We needed to do this. What we did X, Y, and Z. We did a couple different renovations to the house before we jumped into it. But understanding the SLAs of like, oh, well, the painters are good. We need, before we do the carpet cleaners, we need the painters to be done. Well, how long are they going to be here for? Well, we need to work backward. Okay, then this is the case. Now the floor's cleaned. When is Verizon going to come in? Well, I start my job this day. I was starting a new job at that same point as well. So it was, well, when do I need the internet here for? And there's so many different moving pieces that you learn so much about project management and how to effectively manage people. It's like, I got a PhD. Well, mostly my wife. I'll give all the credit to her. We got a PhD in try to organize time and contractors and resources. And again, the other thing, fortunately, because of my dad's background and being handy, we were able to save a lot of cost by being able to do that. So when you talk about the transfer, anybody listen who likes the 20% podcast, or if you haven't before, I'm all about the transferability of skills. And I think it's crucial that he had that construction background and have the know-how to do this, because we saved tens of thousands of dollars by being able to do that. And I think later on down the road, I'd love to have some kind of like renovation company or some type of flipping, or that's going to be one of my future endeavors. It's one of those like dream things, but hopefully one day it'll happen.
You heard it here first. Tyler's home flipping and construction coming to the Pennsylvania area near you soon. No, love that, dude. Think you'd be great at that. Let's pull on one thread that's been a common theme of yours, and I think is very, very, very prevalent in B2B today, which is the nice to haves versus the must haves. And it's something that it sounds so simple, right? Just ask them what their must haves and what their nice haves are. But if you don't go about it the right way, it could just come off as it's all about you, right? Like as, oh, they're just asking me my must haves, so that they're going to jam those features down my throat, right? So like, how do you kind of navigate that? And this could be, we can go directly B2B here instead of home buying. How do you kind of navigate those conversations of asking people what their nice to haves versus must haves are, but doing so in a way that it remains about them, right? It's not you making a sale. It's you coming in to help with a problem.
I think it's even taking a step back from even that conversation, understanding, number one, what are the industry trends around what that person's actually doing? And then ultimately, what is that company as well? And I think if you're bucketing all of that, it's just being able to do your effective research coming into it. Because when you come in, and it's much, this pulls on the thread of my science background as well. It's, you want to come into these conversations with an informed opinion on that, your hypothesis, if you will. Right. So it's, let's say, for example, Alex, you're in a certain industry, and hey, I know that most people in this industry, when we're talking to them, are really interested in A, B, and C, because it affects to their pattern or their certain whatever industry trend.
Right.
And then taking a step further I noticed that your CEO recently said A, B, and C. So there's a couple things that I think would be great, but could you tell me from your perspective, yada, whatever the case is? Then it's, when you're coming in with that informed decision, it's not just asking them, hey, what do you need and what would be great, right? Or what would be a nice to have. It all needs to, especially in this macroeconomic environment, the past 2 years, last year and 2 years, the past 2 years, really, if you're not a must-need technology, you're going to get cut. All of these RevOps teams, everybody's trying to consolidate tools. And now in this age in B2B, we see a lot of these the point solutions, right? Of just hey, we solve this problem, we solve this, are getting swallowed up into having these big platforms, right? We see it happening with the Gongs of the world and Clary, and Outreach is doing a lot of that as well. They're trying to bundle as many things as we possibly can. And again, I don't know too much about this generative AI thing, but what I'm understanding from that is I did that for your SEO, by the way, on this episode. But what it comes down to is like, I think that I'm really bullish on like the brand is going to play a big feature in this because there's not going to be as much differentiation in tools, especially with how quickly teams are going to be able to do that. So taking a step back, it's how do we know that it's a need to have versus a must have? Coming in with a refined, a nice sharpened point on what I think may be the situation. You don't have to be right with it. If you're wrong, that's still okay, because then that will give them the opportunity to say, okay, well, this person's credible. They work with other people that are similar to us. However, that may be right here, but what's a real big focus is A, B, and C. Then once you focus on those, then it's okay. You told me this, you told me that, you told me this. If you had to prioritize what these initiatives were, what does that look like? Then they'll say, well, absolutely number one is this. This is number two. And then number three is something that we could probably figure out down the road. Now you have your first and foremost, well, I'm going to spend the rest of my time talking about 1 and 2. Then I could tell you later on what it looks like as well.
I love what you said there because it's really nuanced. It's not just going in there with an informed opinion and it shows that you give a damn, right? And that you did your research and that you actually know what you're talking about. That, of course, is true. But you're also making it less work for the buyer, right? Like I'm going to make kind of a bizarre analogy. Hang with me here. But like, imagine like going to Cheesecake, right? Cheesecake Factory, right? Where their menu is like an encyclopedia, right? And throwing the menu on the table and telling your buyer, hey, what do you want to eat? Or saying like, hey, I noticed that your CEO really likes hamburgers and cheesecake, right? Can I interest you in one of our hamburgers or cheesecakes, right? You're just taking that decision fatigue down, right? You're not just reaching out to them and telling them, hey, tell me about all your problems and what's keeping you up at night, right? It's, hey, I noticed this, this, and this. So is this happening right now, right? Rather than them having to think and like dig back through all this information, you're kind of teeing it up for them right on a platter, and they almost don't even have to think, and they're just going through a natural conversation. So I think that's a really, really great thread to pull on. We are unfortunately running out of time here, so let's give you your soapbox moment here, Tyler. For those that are still hanging with us, we appreciate you. What would be your biggest takeaway? If folks could take away one thing from this episode, what would be the biggest takeaway that you'd leave with our B2B sellers, Tyler?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it's, oh God, there's so many lessons from this as well. I know we keep talking about it, but I would probably say it's really take the time to be introspective and really understand what are these actual things that I need, or what are those nice to have things. Because, you know, when you're trying to buy a software, or you're trying to, again, join a new company, or whatever the case is, it may be nice to see those nice shiny objects, and you know, we could always jump to that. But really, you really need to put yourself in the shoes and understand that, and talk to people who have been there before. Get mentors around you. Understand what it truly is to be in that position. And again, talking to other people is crucial. You know, I can't even tell you all the mentors that I have that I've been able to amass over the years, who I could call and ask for advice and say, hey, you tell me how it is right now. Be upfront. Tell me straight as it is. And those people have a big factor of, again, it kept coming down around this looking around the corner thing as well. I think that it's important to know what you want, ask those questions to really concrete what it is that we really want. And then from there, I mean, that ultimately helps the decision-making that much more.
Well said, and an exclamation point on the end of another awesome episode. Thank you so much for being here with us, Tyler. Why don't you plug something with the audience before you jump?
Yeah, absolutely. Before we even jump into that, now that you have me thinking about this, it'd be so fun to go into, I would love to work in like a hospitality or a restaurant or something, and be able to use the sales skills that I've developed over time, thinking about this cheesecake situation that you mentioned. It's, hey, if I brought this big cheesecake menu over to Alex and the missus, right, and say, hey, I know that a lot of customers who come in here, is this your first time coming in here? A lot of people are really overwhelmed by this, but don't be worried. Asking a couple questions of like, hey, I'd love to give you some recommendations. A lot of people like A, B, and C, but what do you like specifically? I think that there's I think it'd be really cool of like, we've all had those experiences of somebody doing something really great. Or we just went to a restaurant the other day with both of our kids, and we got our water, and it took 25 minutes before they came back. We ended up walking out of the restaurant, which I've never done in my life, but that's a whole nother point. But anyway, that would be an interesting little a little thought experiment. But plugging myself, follow me on LinkedIn. That's the only social media that I have. If you want to, my one big ask for the audience is just check out one episode of the 20% podcast. If you like it, great. I put a lot of time and effort into it. I only am putting out content that I think would be valuable to other people. So trusting in that. And if you want any recommendations, I'm happy to provide it. I've talked to ex-Navy SEALs, a ton of sales leaders, a lot of people that I probably should have never or would have never talked to without having a podcast. So ultimately is how Alex and I met, and it's how I've one of the best decisions I've ever made. So check it out.
Yeah, I can highly relate to all of that for obvious reasons. So funny that you bring up the restaurant thing again, because the first episode that I ever had a guest with, episode 2, this is like 8-9 months ago, with More Asulin. He did a story about how, a waitress had sold him like the most expensive item on the menu. That one's a blast. If you've not heard that episode yet, go check it out. Go follow Tyler on LinkedIn. Last name is spelled Meckes. Go check out an episode of the 20% podcast. Tyler, thanks so much for being here with us. Sales Stories in Real Life, fam. We'll see you next week. Cheers.
Alex.